Leave now. Don't say anything to your son. The text lit up under the dinner table, a number I didn't recognize. The screen glowed like a siren. My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. Nicole was just placing down dessert, creme brulee and dainty ramekins like we were a perfect polished family. But my hands trembled. The message was too strange, too urgent. I felt the tightness in my chest before I understood it. Something was wrong, deeply, dangerously wrong. I pushed back my chair and clutched my side like I'd felt a sharp pain. "Dizzy," I muttered. "Must be my blood pressure. I need to lie down." Lucas sprang up. "Mom, are you okay?" I forced a weak smile, shaking my head just enough to make it believable. "I'll call you when I feel better." I grabbed my purse, still half-zipped, and walked straight out their front door into the thick suburban silence of their neighborhood. Nicole didn't even follow. 10 minutes later, I was parked 2 streets away, hands shaking around the steering wheel when the knock came to their door. The police. I watched them from my rear-view mirror. 2 officers. Firm and businesslike, I couldn't hear the words, but I saw Lucas's face twist with confusion. Nicole stood behind him, hand on her chest in that dramatic little way she does when she wants sympathy. I wasn't meant to be in that house much longer. I was almost there hostage, back in the car. I unlocked the phone again. A second message blinked on screen. "They plan to commit you today." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. But the cold I felt wasn't from the night air. It was from inside me, spreading, solidifying. Nicole had kissed me on the cheek before dessert. Lucas had made a toast. And meanwhile, they were preparing to declare me incompetent and take everything. I thought I knew betrayal. But betrayal doesn't always come with slamming doors or angry words. Sometimes it comes in the form of creme brulee served with a spoonful of honeyed poison. And the worst part, I almost let them. Almost. The second message stayed on my screen like a bruise. "They plan to commit you today." I read it again and again. I was parked in the dark, 2 streets away from their home, headlights off, heart a battlefield of fury and disbelief. But I had felt it. I had felt it before. Not as clearly, not as urgently, but the signs were there. I just didn't want to see them. I closed my eyes and saw it. Nicole's sunroom 2 weeks ago. We were drinking tea. Chamomile for me. Something matcha-colored and overpriced for her. She leaned back on her pristine white cushions and laughed, an offhanded chuckle that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Don't worry, Claire. We'll take care of you when your mind goes." Lucas had laughed, too, a low, sheepish sound. I thought they were joking. Dark humor, maybe? I'd even laughed a little just to smooth over the awkwardness. But now I saw it clearly. They weren't joking. They were preparing me, testing how far they could push without raising alarm. I remembered the way she looked at me, like I was already fading. The same way you look at a house you're planning to remodel. I dismissed it. I didn't want to believe that my own son, my baby boy, who used to sleep with his head on my shoulder during thunderstorms, was laughing with his wife about the day I'd lose my mind. Now I realized they weren't waiting for that day. They were writing it into existence. Lucas had already filed paperwork. I could feel it in my gut. The way he avoided direct answers when I asked about their finances. The way Nicole always called just after I'd taken my sleeping pills, like she wanted to catch me drowsy and confused. The whole thing had been scripted carefully, slowly, lovingly, almost. The kind of cruelty that only people who know you intimately can commit. They didn't want to help me. They wanted to erase me. And they nearly had. My fingers clutched the steering wheel tighter. The rage came in waves. First shame, then sorrow, and now something colder, something sharper. They thought they were clever. They thought the past 71 years of my life, my career, my independence, my grief, my survival, meant nothing. That I was ready to be tucked into a corner, written off in ink, and filed away. Let them think that. Let them think I'm fragile because they just showed their hand. And now it's my turn. The steering wheel had cooled in my grip. The streetlights outside buzzed, quiet and indifferent. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I drove home with hands that no longer trembled, not from fear, but from focus. Whatever weakness they were counting on, It had vanished somewhere between dessert and that second message. I locked the front door behind me. Deadbolt, chain, second latch. Then again, old habit. But tonight, it felt like survival. And that's when I saw it. The hallway closet door was ajar. My breath hitched just for a second. I hadn't opened that door in weeks. Inside, behind coats and boxes, sat the small fireproof safe I'd kept since before Lucas was born. I knelt in front of it and entered the code. Click, swing open, empty. My stomach didn't drop. It hardened, the will. The living trust gone. They'd been here. Not guessed, not suspected, been in my home with keys. I never gave Nicole. While I was out buying groceries or watching the Sunday sermon reruns, they were building their fantasy piece by piece, a hopeless old woman with too much house, too much memory, and no one to stop them. But they made one mistake. They left me breathing. I stood slowly, shutting the safe with deliberate calm. They had no idea I'd gotten the warning, no idea I hadn't taken the bait, and they were still moving forward like I was already locked away somewhere. Sedated, invisible, gone. I walked into the living room and stared at the photos still lining the mantel. Lucas at 5, dirt on his cheeks, holding up a wonky birthday cake we made together, one I ruined by forgetting the sugar. He'd laughed, said it was the best cake he ever had. What changed, I didn't ask out loud. That question didn't matter anymore, not really. What mattered was the next move, mine. I reached for my phone, opened my notes, and created a new file. Retaliation. Do not delete. No panic, no noise, just facts, dates, documents. I started listing what they took, what they'd altered, what I needed to recover before they realized I was no longer the old woman nodding along at family dinners. They stole from me in the dark. Now I'd expose them in the light. And when I was done, Lucas would learn that a forged signature was nothing compared to a mother scorned. By morning, the house was already cleaner than it had been in years, not from panic, but from precision. I'd pulled every drawer, every cabinet. I wanted to know exactly what they might have touched, photographed, copied. Anything I'd miss could be used against me, so I left nothing to chance. Then I drove. Not to the courthouse, not to the bank, not yet. I needed eyes, trusted ones. Someone who still remembered what a forged guardianship smelled like before it was ever filed. Someone who wouldn't ask me if I was sure. Someone who'd already seen too many families devour their own. That's how I ended up across from Teresa Gates. She used to be a deputy clerk back when I worked probate. Quick-witted, chain-smoking, and quietly loyal to women like me who didn't get warnings. Only aftershocks. She'd retired 3 years ago. But I remembered her favorite spot. Still sat in the same booth. Still ordered dry toast and coffee blacker than sin. She looked up and grinned. "Claire Jordan," she said, her voice raspier than I remembered. "You look like hell." "Good," I replied, sliding into the booth. "I need someone who knows how to crawl through it." Her smile vanished the moment I showed her the text. The one that said, "Get up and go now. Don't say anything to your son." I watched her hand stop mid-stir in her coffee. The spoon clinked at once, then stilled. "Who sent this?" she asked. "I don't know," I said. "The number's unlisted, but whoever it was, they saved me." She scrolled through the screen and her eyes narrowed. "This prefix, it's a county phone. Court intern, maybe probation or clerk side. Young, new, dumb enough to use a real number, but good-hearted." I nodded once. "He saw something and wanted you out before they filed." She looked up slowly. "You think they've already done it? I think they've been doing it for months." I pulled out my phone again and scrolled to the photos I'd taken of the empty safe. I told her about the missing trust, the will, the hospital directive I barely remembered signing while hooked to an IV, the little comments, the creeping pattern, Nicole's too sweet tea, and Lucas's suddenly soft concern for my well-being. I used to think I was imagining it. I admitted. The way they repeated things like I hadn't heard them, left messages with words I never said, hinted at confusion in front of other people, all subtle, but all very, very planned. Teresa leaned in. Her voice dropped. "Claire, you need a lawyer, not a nice one, a ruthless one." I didn't flinch. "Already scheduled," I said. "Gold. Monday at 10 Haro." Her eyebrows lifted. "Oh, you're serious." "Serious?" I looked her dead in the eye. "They tried to take my life before I was dead. I'm going to take back everything they thought they stole, and I'm going to salt the ground they tried to bury me under." Teresa smiled. Slow, wide, the kind of grin that only ever comes from seeing a woman walk out of a fire and realize the flames no longer scare her. "You're going to need evidence," she said, "and not just screenshots. You need certified records, file dates, signatures. Someone saw that will and didn't shred it. You track down who processed it. You'll find who helped them." I nodded. "You still got friends at the courthouse." She winked enough to rattle the windows. When I stood to leave, she reached across the table and touched my wrist. "Claire," she said softly, "they thought you were weak." I pulled my hand gently away, then let that be their first mistake, because this wasn't just about saving my home or my name. It was about revenge. And I'd only just begun to sharpen the blade. Teresa's words rang in my ears long after I left the diner. "They thought you were weak." No, they knew I was strong. That's why they tried to make me look insane first. Because when people like Lucas can't control you, they tried to erase you. Monday came with bitter wind and no sun fitting. I thought I dressed like it was court day, even though it wasn't yet. Slate slacks, navy blouse, coat stiff with pressed wool. I brought every document I had in a locked accordion file, tucked under one arm like a weapon, because it was Attorney Goldstein's office was tucked in a converted Victorian bookcases, heavy with real law books, not just showpieces. When I stepped into his office, he looked up from his desk and pushed his glasses up the bridge of his nose. "Claire," he said, standing, "you look prepared." "You have no idea," I replied, and I dropped the file between us with a thud that made his coffee ripple. He took his time, page by page. He flipped through the original trust we'd written after my husband died, my old living will, my list of accounts, properties, personal assets. He didn't speak for a full 10 minutes, and then he pulled out a second manila folder, one I'd never seen. "This," he said carefully, "was filed in your name 2 weeks ago." My throat tightened. "Filed where?" "Through probate," he answered. "It's a new will, dated, stamped, and notarized." He slid it toward me. "Only, it's not your signature." I stared at the page. My name curved across the bottom, but it wasn't mine. The J was too wide. The E in Jordan had a loop I never used. My stomach turned cold. "They forged it," I whispered. He nodded, and not well. He pulled another document, a guardianship petition, my full name, filed by Lucas Jordan. I read the claim. Subject has exhibited confusion, leaves appliances on, repeats conversations, shows signs of memory decline consistent with early-stage dementia, lies. Every line of it. "Do they have a doctor's note?" I asked. "Not yet," he said, flipping through. "But I'd bet they're working on it. If they find any physician, anyone to say you seem mentally compromised, even slightly, they can argue you're a danger to yourself." I felt the fire return to my chest, not fear, rage. All those times Nicole offered to refill my prescriptions, saying she'd keep track for me, the herbal supplements she insisted I take, the wine she poured too generously at dinner. The jokes about how I misplaced things, Lucas always nodding along. They were stacking their case for months, forcing a decline, then writing the report before it ever happened. "I want to fight," I said, voice steel. Goldstein leaned back in his chair. "Good. Then we start now." I met his eyes. "No. We started when they opened my safe." He blinked. "Claire, most people in your situation just want to get their documents back, restore their estate. I don't want just restoration." I said coldly, "I want scorched earth." Because this wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't panic or misplaced concern. It was greed in its most cowardly form, dressed up in family dinners and birthday toasts, covered in fake affection. And I had played my part, smiled, nodded, hugged the people who were paving my way into a padded room. They thought betrayal would break me. It did something worse. It cleared my vision. I wasn't fighting just to get my name back on the deed. I was fighting to make sure they never touched another dime of mine again. Not one dish, not one framed photo, not one stick of furniture. And when I was done, their names would carry the stench of what they tried to do. He handed me a legal pad. Let's start from the top. And I did. Every time they manipulated me, every lie, every document, every bottle of wine poured with a smile, I would take all of it, and I would bury them in the truth. It's strange how quiet revenge can be. No screaming, no slammed doors, just the soft shuffle of paper, the smell of dust and ink, and the slow, methodical sharpening of a blade you plan to use by Wednesday. I was at the courthouse. Not in court. Not yet. I was deeper than that. In the basement where real war begins, records, affidavit, paper trails no one thinks will be followed. They didn't count on me still knowing the system. I still remembered the badge I used to wear, the elevator key code, the sound of the third-floor fax machine that never worked. The new clerk behind the records desk had no idea who I was. Good. Guardianship petition file number 22J8061, I said, slipping the request form through the glass. She blinked. Relation to the subject is me, I said. Her eyes widened slightly, but she nodded, stamped it, and disappeared behind the swinging double doors. 10 minutes later, she returned with a folder, thick, sloppy, just like them. I took a seat by the wall and started turning pages. There it was again, that signature that wasn't mine. Their lies stacked neatly like folded linens, observed wandering at odd hours, repeats questions, becomes confused in conversations. They even mentioned the oven, claimed I'd left it on for hours. Funny thing, I don't use the oven. I microwave, always have. Ever since my hands got stiff in winter, I even photographed the stove after I cleaned the kitchen. Out of habit, time-stamped, neat, obsessive, the kind of habit they would have mocked if they realized what it protected me from. I smiled. It wasn't warm. They wrote a fiction. I brought receipts. I pulled out my phone and started organizing. Screenshots, photos of my stove turned off every night. Voice memos I'd started recording after they first joked about memory loss. Each lie they filed became another nail in the box I was building for their careers, their reputations, their inheritance. I requested certified copies of everything, made them notorize while I watched. The girl at the counter looked uneasy now. Is everything okay? I met her gaze. Not yet. Outside. The air was dry and hard with cold. I sat on the courthouse steps and stared at the folder in my lap. They really believed I'd go quietly, that some half-baked affidavit and a doctor with bad handwriting could undo 71 years of selfhood, of motherhood, of womanhood. Let me tell you something. You don't bury a woman like me with paper. You need fire, and they didn't bring nearly enough of it. By the time I got back to my car, I had already forwarded every page to Goldstein and uploaded the rest to an encrypted drive. I started a new file in my phone, exhibits for trial. Because yes, there would be a trial. They wanted to label me incompetent. I'd stand in that courtroom with their lies in one hand and my truth in the other, and I'd let the whole damn room watch them burn. Let Lucas look into the eyes of the woman he tried to silence. Let Nicole see what happens when the woman you dismiss as old is the same woman who helped build the system you just tried to manipulate. This wasn't fear anymore. This was justice wrapped in lipstick, heels, and a will of iron they forgot I had. By the end of that week, I had a paper trail so solid one could feel it humming in my purse. Every lie they filed countered, every trick neutralized. I should have felt safe. Instead, I felt hunted. The parking lot behind Haley's Market was nearly empty. The rain had just cleared, leaving streaks on the windshield and a sky so gray it looked bruised. I just loaded 2 bags into the back seat when I heard her voice. Sweet, casual. But it clanged in my skull like an alarm bell. Claire. I turned. Nicole stood there holding an iced coffee, purse slung too perfectly over her shoulder. Fake smiles stretched across her lips like a mask sewn too tight. She didn't look surprised to see me. She looked expectant, as if she'd been waiting. I didn't speak. Just shut the car door slowly and faced her. "You've been avoiding us," she said lightly, like I'd missed a hair appointment. "Lucas is worried." I raised an eyebrow. "Worried I might still have a mind of my own." Her smile twitched at the corner. "Just for a second, we're just trying to make sure you're taken care of." I stepped closer. "You mean locked away? Medicated, declared incompetent so you and my son can play house with my name still on the deed." She blinked fast, the pretense cracking. Her voice dropped lower, sharper. "You're ruining everything." There it was, the truth. Not wrapped in honey or silk, just bone and nerve. "You were supposed to just—" She trailed off, eyes searching mine. Then she said it. "Let go. Not heal. Not relax. Not rest. Let go, as in surrender, disappear, vacate." She wasn't talking about safety. She was talking about extinction. I stared at her, quiet, and in that silence, I finally saw it. The fear underneath her fury. She thought they were close, that the lie had been accepted, that I was too slow, too trusting, too old to outmaneuver them. And now I was a problem, a liability, a ghost who refused to stay buried. "You want me gone," I said, calm, cold. She looked around, maybe to see if anyone was watching, and hissed, "You're making this harder than it needs to be." "You have no idea how hard I can make it," I said. My voice was steady, sharp enough to cut her. She flinched, and for the first time, I saw the power shift. She wasn't here to scare me. She was here because she was scared. Scared I'd found out. Scared I'd retaliate. Scared I'd already started. And I had. "I know about the will," I said, watching her pupils widen, "and the guardianship and the notarized fraud." She dropped the act completely. Her face went flat, stripped of charm, just calculation and panic. "You can't prove. I can. I cut in and I will." Her lips parted like she wanted to scramble, reach for some control. But there was none left. I opened my car door. "You wanted me to disappear. Instead, you woke me up." She didn't respond. Couldn't, because for the first time, I wasn't playing the role. I wasn't Mom or Claire or the poor, confused woman. I was the woman who'd built her life from broken pieces and now had nothing left to lose. I drove away as she stood motionless, iced coffee trembling in her hand. Let her watch me go. Let her feel it. Because I was coming for every lie she'd told, every signature she'd forged, every fake smile she'd weaponized. Let them panic, because now I was the storm. I couldn't sleep that night. Not because I was afraid, because I was done waiting. For years, I waited for help, for respect, for honesty from the people I'd loved most. I waited through their manipulations, their hints that I was slipping, their rehearsed lines and crocodile tears. And now they'd wait for my retaliation. The police station was almost empty when I walked in. The desk sergeant was young, polite, and visibly startled when I placed a large red accordion folder on the counter between us. "I'm here to report attempted elder fraud, identity theft, and the preparation of false medical claims for guardianship control." He blinked like I'd spoken a foreign language. I leaned in, calm and quiet. "You're going to want to get someone from White Collar or Family Protection." 5 minutes later, I was sitting across from a detective, older, slower, with skeptical eyes and fingers that drummed lightly on the desk as I began laying it all out. The text message, the stolen documents, the forged will, the photos of my untouched stove, the voice memos I'd made daily for 3 months, the notarized originals they thought I'd lost. I showed them Nicole's zoning plans, the Zillow printouts in her bag. I described how she walked through my house like it was a showroom, already redesigning what she didn't own. I showed them screenshots of her posts, praising my generosity for passing down the home. Every word was documented, every interaction time-stamped. He didn't speak until the end. Then he exhaled, leaned back, and said, "You may have stopped this just in time. It wasn't justice yet, but it was a beginning." He took my file, scanned it into their system, logged the complaint, asked if I wanted to press charges immediately. I looked him in the eye. "Not yet. Let them think they're safe. Let them keep smiling in their borrowed reality." He paused. "That's cold." "No," I said. "That's controlled. Outside." The morning light had broken through the clouds. I stood on the sidewalk, feeling the weight of my folder now lifted, replaced with something harder, sharper. I wasn't just protecting myself anymore. I was building a case strong enough to bury their ambitions, let Lucas go to sleep, thinking I was still his old mother, clueless and fading. Let Nicole sip her iced coffee and scroll Pinterest for nursery wallpaper. Because they didn't know what was coming. The complaint was filed. The system was moving quietly, slowly, but just like me, unstoppable. I got into my car, started the engine, and whispered to the empty seat beside me. They had to get rid of me while they had the chance because now I was wide awake. Nicole's face in that parking lot had said everything I needed to know. They thought they were almost done. The guardianship, the new will, the narrative, they assumed I'd crumble, that I'd fight like a woman already halfway defeated. But what they forgot was this. I worked in the courthouse for 34 years. I've seen every flavor of fraud, every self-righteous child who thinks inheritance is a birthright instead of a blessing. They'd picked the wrong woman. Tuesday morning, I walked into the bank like it was a battlefield. Neutral expression, coat pressed, papers in hand. Everything I needed was already in motion. Goldstein helped me set it up that weekend. The teller recognized me, smiled. "Hi, Claire. How can we—" "I need to speak to the branch manager privately." She paused, then nodded and gestured me toward the glass office in the back. The man inside stood when I entered, mid-40s, polite, the kind of smile that looked like it had been trained into his face by customer service seminars. He gestured for me to sit. I didn't. Instead, I slid a thick envelope onto his desk. "That's my new trust, the Claire Jordan Living Trust, restructured and protected." He opened it, scanned the first page, and raised an eyebrow. "This supersedes any previous version." I said, "Power of attorney revoked. Beneficiaries changed. My son and daughter-in-law are no longer authorized on any financial matters, and I'd like every account tied to the previous trust, especially the joint ones, frozen, flagged, and disconnected from my profile." He cleared his throat. "That's extensive." I met his eyes. "It's necessary." I leaned forward, calm and deliberate. They filed to have me declared mentally unfit while also leveraging my assets as if I'd already signed them over. "I want everything tied to my name locked down tighter than Fort Knox until this is over." I could see it register in his face, how serious this was. He didn't ask if I was sure. He saw the steel behind my words. He clicked his keyboard and began the process. 10 minutes later, it was done. My accounts transferred to the new trust, my retirement fund firewalled, my home retitled under a private holding clause. Access me and only me. They had no idea yet. They still thought they were circling a prize, but now they were locked out of everything. And when they found out, it would hit them like a wall they never saw coming. As I stood to leave, the manager hesitated. "Mrs. Jordan, are you safe?" I looked at him, truly looked at him, then smiled faintly. "I'm dangerous," I said. "But yes, I'm safe." That night, I sat at my kitchen table and stared at the photo of Lucas as a boy, his gap to smile, hands covered in chocolate cake at his 7th birthday. I whispered to the photo, "You were enough. You always were. I would have given you everything if you'd only loved me more than you loved what I owned. But he didn't, and now he'd get nothing. Let them try to use their forged power of attorney. Let them call the bank. Let them demand access. They'd be met with silence, then questions, then consequences. Because this time, I filed first. And I wasn't just protecting what was mine. I was taking theirs away. Piece by bloody piece. The wind outside howled through the trees. It was the kind of night most people would call lonely, but not me. I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by silence with every light off except the little pendant lamp above the stove. I didn't need brightness. What I needed was clarity, and I had it now. In front of me lay a photo album, not digital, not stored on some cloud, real, bound in leather, thick with fingerprints and years. I turned the pages slowly. Lucas at 6 holding a seashell to his ear on the beach. Lucas at 10 arms flung around my shoulders, eyes wild with joy after winning the spelling bee. Lucas at 19, cheeks flushed as I hugged him after his college orientation, me beaming, him already tugging away. I used to think those moments meant something permanent, that love once given could not be undone. But love isn't a will. It doesn't have beneficiaries, and it damn sure doesn't guarantee loyalty. I whispered his name once, not out of affection, out of grief, because grief isn't always about death. Sometimes it's about survival, about realizing the person you protected your whole life just became your predator. The thing is, I didn't raise him to be cruel. I raised him to be clever, to be composed, to take care of what he wanted. He did exactly that, except I was what he wanted. I closed the photo album. It didn't feel like nostalgia. It felt like evidence. You see, something shifted in me after that meeting at the bank. When I walked out of that branch, my heels clicking hard on the tile, I realized they didn't just try to take my house. They tried to take my dignity, my mind, my identity. And worst of all, they tried to do it quietly, like I wouldn't notice, like I was already gone. That's what lit the match inside me, because if they were willing to erase me while I was still breathing, I'd make sure they lived long enough to see the consequences, every single one. I opened my journal and began to write. Not thoughts, not reflections, a statement, the one I'd read in court. It began, I am of sound mind, body, and memory, and I have evidence to prove it. This is what happened. This is what they did. And this is why they will not get away with it. I don't care if they cry in court. I don't care if Nicole paints herself the martyr or if Lucas puts on that trembling lower lip like he did when he was 8 and broke my mother's vase. They made a choice. Not once, not in a moment of desperation, but over weeks, months. They looked at my love and saw property. They looked at my name and saw leverage. They looked at my mind and saw a loophole. So I'll look them in the eye and show them what consequences look like. I left the journal open, let the ink dry naturally. Then I went to the mirror above the sink. I didn't see an old woman. I saw a weapon. They had tried to bury me alive, but I wasn't in the ground. I was rising, and I was bringing the truth with me. The house smelled like lemon polish and certainty. Stacks of paper lined my coffee table. Not chaos. Strategy. Goldstein had stopped calling me a client by now. He called me a storm in heels. I took it as a compliment. Everything they used to build their lie. I turned it into a weapon, and I did it in silence. Let Lucas and Nicole think I was hiding, humiliated, broken. Let them get comfortable. They had no idea I'd spent the past week turning their own words into a noose. I sat cross-legged on the floor in front of the fireplace, sorting through the final folders, one for financials, one for mental fitness, and one for legal fraud. Signature comparison analysis digital trail showing Lucas accessed my printer remotely. Nicole's email leaked from her old coworker. I'd reached out to Nicole's former colleague, a woman who used to work with her in interior design before Nicole quit to focus on family. She emailed me last Tuesday after 3 days of silence. Claire, she bragged, said the house would be hers in a month, that Lucas was clearing the paperwork. I thought she meant a gift. I didn't know they were doing this. She attached screenshots of their text thread. Nicole had sent photos of my dining room talking about converting it to an open concept, entertaining space. A month ago, I printed every word. Goldstein reviewed the final binder and nodded. "This isn't a defense anymore," he said, his voice low and proud. "This is an attack." "Good. I replied. Because I'm done playing defense. I had one more stop that day. I returned to my doctor's office, not for a checkup, but for a letter. He asked gently, "Is everything okay?" I looked him square in the eye. "Not yet, but I'm about to make it." He handed me the envelope. Inside, a notarized letter of mental competency complete with test results and a formal recommendation that I remain independent. I sealed it like a loaded gun. Back home, I placed everything into labeled binders. Then, I put on lipstick, scarlet, and stared at my reflection. This face. This wasn't a woman waiting to be heard. This was a woman coming to take the floor. Lucas and Nicole had prepared for a woman who cried in confusion. What they would get was a woman who collected evidence while they plotted, who turned every betrayal into ammunition, who sharpened her heartbreak into testimony. And I would sit across from them, calm, cold, precise, and watch them unravel. This wasn't about winning back my freedom. I'd already taken that. This was about exposing them publicly, permanently, so that every dinner party Nicole ever hosts, every LinkedIn connection Lucas tries to make, every friend they try to lie to, they'll remember this. They'll remember me. 1 week to court. And I was ready. Let the vultures come. I've been sharpening my talons. The courtroom was colder than I remembered. Not the air, the eyes. Strangers lined the benches. Most there for unrelated cases, but a few had that glint. Neighbors, former church friends, community members who came because they'd heard whispers. Lucas Jordan's trying to declare his mother unfit. She has dementia. Right, Nicole said she left the stove on. I walked in upright, heels sharp. Binder clutched like scripture, dressed in deep navy, the color of someone who will not be silenced. Lucas wouldn't meet my eyes. "Nicole." She smirked, a tight theatrical smile, like she'd already accepted the flowers after her final bow. She didn't know the curtain was about to fall. The judge, Honorable Miriam Caldwell, glanced through the file. She was sharp, observant, and not fond of theatrics. I'd seen her cut liars down like weeds when I worked clerkside years ago. The moment the hearing opened, Lucas's attorney stood. He launched into it with a voice thick with practiced concern. "Miss Jordan has shown alarming cognitive decline, repeating questions, forgetting important dates, wandering into unsafe environments." Nicole sat just behind him, dabbing her eyes with a tissue she hadn't used before entering the courtroom, a performance beneath her chair, a $900 designer handbag. I stared at Lucas. His expression was perfect, stoic, tragic, beautiful. I almost laughed. Almost. The judge turned to me. "Miss Jordan, do you have counsel?" Goldstein stood. "We do, Your Honor, and we have evidence." I handed over the file. Judge Caldwell flipped it open. Inside were timestamps of my stove photographed off daily for 6 months. My physician's signed letter, no cognitive impairment, screenshots of Nicole's texts bragging about renovations, signature analysis showing the forgery, and a notarized affidavit from my home nurse stating, "I lived independently, drove myself, and maintained appointments and medication without error." Silence. Then Caldwell turned the page and paused. Her gaze landed on the transcript of Nicole's email thread. Nicole stiffened. The judge read out loud. She said the house would be ours by October. Claire wouldn't even see it coming. There was a rustle in the courtroom. Lucas's attorney looked up, startled. Nicole's face drained. Her performance suddenly cracked. Her mouth parted, a flush blooming across her chest. Lucas stood. "Objection. This is out of context." Caldwell raised her hand. "Sit down." He obeyed. Nicole looked like she wanted to vanish, but there was nowhere left to hide. The judge turned to me. "Miss Jordan, you are without question of sound mind. You've presented more clarity and evidence than most litigants half your age." She turned to Lucas and Nicole. Her voice dropped to a low, slicing register. "You attempted to dismantle a woman's life with lies, forged documents, and false medical claims." A long pause. No one moved. Then she said, cold and clear, "Motion denied, petition dismissed, civil consequences pending," gasps. Nicole burst into tears, real ones this time. Lucas's jaw clenched like steel, his face frozen. I didn't blink because I'd already mourned the son I raised. This was just the burial. Outside. People looked at me differently. No longer frail, no longer poor Claire. They looked at me like I'd done something impossible. But I hadn't. I'd simply told the truth and refused to die quietly. And now the real reckoning would begin because the charges hadn't even landed yet. And I wasn't done. Not until everything they touched turned to ash. The courtroom didn't empty fast. People lingered, not out of courtesy, but curiosity. That kind of thick, stunned silence where no one dares move first, like they just witnessed a car crash in slow motion. But I moved. I stood smooth and unshaking and turned to face them. Lucas, Nicole. Their lies lay in pieces on the floor. But still they looked at me like they could rebuild it. That was their disease, entitlement. They couldn't process that I had won because in their world I was already dead weight, an obstacle, a name on paper, not a person, not a mother, not anymore. Judge Caldwell gathered her files, but before she left the bench, she looked directly at Lucas. Mr. Jordan, this court is forwarding all documents to the district attorney. We will notify Adult Protective Services for a formal investigation. If there was fraud, and it appears there was, charges will follow. Lucas tried to speak, but Caldwell had already stood. And she wasn't listening anymore. I didn't need her gabble to feel the sentence landing. Lucas and Nicole sat frozen. I walked toward them slowly, each step deliberate. Lucas opened his mouth. "Mom, don't," I said. My voice didn't shake. It sliced. "Don't say another word unless it's under oath." His jaw snapped shut like a dog that had been kicked. Nicole blinked at me, mascara smudged, skin pale. "You ruined everything." "No," I said. "You did that when you looked at me and saw a vault instead of a woman." She flinched. "Good." I leaned forward, lowered my voice so only they could hear. "You wanted the house, the bank accounts, my name, my life." I paused. "You could have had love. You had loyalty. You had years of it." I let the silence stretch. "But you chose greed." Lucas's hands trembled slightly, still silent. So I looked him dead in the eyes and said what I'd been waiting to say since the night I got that text. "You're no son of mine." I turned and walked away, heels echoing against marble. Not because I needed the sound, because I wanted them to hear what certainty looks like when it leaves the room. Outside, the air was crisp. Reporters hovered, not sure whether to approach. One stepped forward hesitantly. "Miss Jordan?" "Anything you want to say?" I looked right into the camera lens. "Don't underestimate the quiet ones. Don't assume silence means surrender. And if you try to bury someone like me, you better pray she doesn't dig her way out." Behind me, the courtroom doors opened. Lucas stepped out head low. Nicole clutched her coat, jaw tight. They didn't look at me, but they didn't have to. The whole world was starting to because this wasn't just a family matter anymore. It was a case, a public record, a warning. And every time someone Googled their names, they'd read exactly what they tried to do. That's what justice looked like. Not just courtroom silence, but lifetime noise. It was poetic. The same courthouse where Lucas tried to erase me was now the stage where I watched his name burn in full view of the public. The press conference was brisk, brutal, beautiful. I didn't flinch when they read the charges. Lucas Jordan and Nicole Jordan are being prosecuted for attempted elder fraud, identity theft, forgery, false medical reporting, and conspiracy to defraud an estate valued at $2.1 million. I didn't blink when they listed every detail, every document they faked, every lie they filed, every cent they tried to move out from under me while calling it love. And when the reporter asked, "Mrs. Jordan, how does it feel to know they'll face jail time?" I stepped to the microphone and answered calmly, "They're not just losing their freedom, they lost me." And that's a sentence that won't expire. Lucas had always believed in control, in smiling while tightening the leash. Nicole believed in image, filters, angles, and hosting brunches on marble countertops she never paid for. And now he was in a holding cell. She was being investigated by her licensing board. Every account they touched was frozen. Every lie was printed and filed under State versus Jordan. But revenge, real revenge, is never just punishment. It's exposure. It's making sure the world sees who they are beneath the borrowed charm. I gave no speeches in court, no drama. Just facts. Cold, clear, surgical. And that's what destroyed them. A month later, I stood under a different roof. Same county. Very different scene. The banner above me read Claire Jordan, Senior Defense Initiative. That's what I did with part of my estate. I funded a legal aid program for seniors targeted by their own families. We give free consultations, emergency injunctions, court escorts. I make sure no woman sits alone in a courtroom like I almost did. That's how I spend my mornings now. No longer fighting for myself, now I fight for women who haven't found their voices yet. The press asked me again at the launch. Why go public? Why not just move on? I answered, simply because they did it in the dark and I want their shame lit up like daylight. I've seen their names pop up now and then. Nicole tried launching an interior design Instagram under a fake name. It tanked. Lucas sent me a letter through his attorney. He wrote, "I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't open it because intentions don't erase attempts and regret doesn't repair betrayal. It just proves it failed. My house is still mine, my name restored, my trust unbreakable, and my heart scarred but steady because I did more than survive their plan. I made sure it turned back on them. Every lie, every document, every whispered manipulation, all of it collapsed under the weight of my silence, my strength, and my facts. They tried to bury me under false papers. I buried them in public truth. What's the right way to handle something like this? Was the justice enough? Or would you have gone even further? Let me know in the comments where you're listening from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if this one hit you in the heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you never miss what comes next.